Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for being here today. Today we're lucky enough to get a chat with David Court, author of Scenes of Mild Peril. And aside from just the really great cover art you got going on here, it's something to be said about a short story anthology where it's one thing where you write one good short story. And I think this is what's really hard within the indie spheres. Like you might write one good chapter, one good short story, but creating an anthology of 29, 30 short stories that all hold up to each other is not an easy feat, and it's something that should definitely be shared. And there's so
Thank
many stories here that left me kind of having to process and left me, I guess, just a wide range of emotions from a wide range of genres. And just hats off to you. I really enjoyed it. And more than anything, sorry, I'm rambling here, but more than anything, huge thank you for being the most patient YPQ author of all time because we got this submission in I believe December of 2023, and it's
Yeah.
been so nice to be able to actually feature it when the time came. So
It
thank
was so nice to hear out of the blue, though, because I'll be honest, I'd kind of forgotten about it.
you.
It sat on my spreadsheet for ages. Like, right, if we get another good anthology, we've got Scenes of Mild Peril there. So it was like a little comfort for a while because I read it. God, I read it a while ago, probably during the initial search for books and stuff that I found. Put it on the TBR, and I remember I put it on when I opened it, and I saw at the start, Time Machine worked, and I went, "Oh, right, hold on." I bet this comes back. I bet there's something in here. In the opening, where you mentioned that it was a bit like a difficult third album, where it was a bit kind of improvisational jazz like, I thought I'm probably going to like this. And I've only recently started myself trying shorter styles of fiction stuff and experimenting a bit. So it maybe just found me at the right kind of time. But as I went through, even if it hadn't have said that at the start, as I read through it and I was taking some notes on the stories, I would have thought to myself anyway, this feels like an opportunity to experiment. There's so many different little things that I could see you trying in it. So if we had time, I don't know, like a minute per story, we could get through all 30 stories, you know.
Speed round.
But I wanted to start off with something a bit more broad, which would be of all the things that you tried, what do you think worked the best? What do you think not worked best?
uh, I think my favourite story from the book is probably Let It Cry, because that was my the first ever story I had to do some proper historical research for. And despite the fact it did feel like I was going to get a little lost in research, in fact, the research took longer than it actually took to write the actual story. It got me intrigued by that side of writing, which I'd never really done before. So it was nice. It was nice actually getting some proper history in there. So I think that's my favourite story. That's the one that seems to have resonated the most with readers as well, which has always been
Yeah,
which is
Let It
always
Cry
nice
was
to hear.
great.
Yeah, that was definitely, if I remember, that was the one you ended on as well. It's definitely a hard hitting story to tie it all together.
Initially, it was way more horror than it was. Because it was written in the first instance for another horror anthology, but I ended up toning it down in the end. So it's like it was like there was a very gory ending in the original one, but I thought it didn't really fit with the rest of the piece
Mhm.
because it's more about mood setting than any direct gore. So it was nice to kind of tone it down and just have a disturbing ending rather than an all out gore fest like I'd have tended to write back in those days.
It definitely it stays with me more when you have that slightly not in your face gory, like the subtle implications of it always sit with me a bit longer. And that was the one where at the end of it, you'd said it was about the was it the Dublin or so it was in Ireland, wasn't it? The
Yeah,
plague
from
victims that
Ireland.
they'd bricked up.
Yeah, yeah. I literally the wife is from Dublin, so we'd gone there
Yeah,
and we did a ghost bus tour, so going around all the haunted spots of
yeah,
Ireland, and it ended at a bar which was by a on the edge of a cemetery, and the
nice.
tour guide was explaining about the walling in of plague victims. And I literally started writing the notes for that on the bus back from that trip. So I'd written the opening paragraph and just I'd taken character names from the gravestones and stuff like that. So
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a
Inspiration
cool.
strikes from everywhere.
Likewise, a VIP was written literally in Iceland, having just gone to the Blue Lagoon geothermal pools.
Okay. Huh.
Because I think all three of us in this chat have been to the Blue Lagoon. Ryan, you've been to the Blue
I've
Lagoon in
been,
Iceland,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I
What
think
an
there's something about that. There's,
incredible experience.
oh
Something
yeah, I
weird.
loved it.
As I said, there's something weird about getting off the airplane and going straight there before you even get into the city or anything like that. It's like you're not wasting any time.
Oh, we did it on the last day, and I remember it was just such a weird thing being outside Napoleon. It was literally snowing, heavily snowing,
Yeah.
but all of the snow
Nice.
was evaporating before it got anywhere near you, just because of the heat from the thermal pool. So it was almost like being in a force field of some kind. You'd
Yo,
I
watch the
remember
snow
when we
literally
were,
turn to water.
yeah, Iceland's such a beautiful country as well. I remember when we were there, we went on the last day, and it was during the months when the sun doesn't go down.
yeah.
So we all kind of went a little bit loopy and then had to spend 3 hours on a bus with no mobile signal to get there. And I remember when me and my friends got off the bus, we'd covered ourselves in, like, we had a permanent mark, not a permanent marker, but like a marker pen.
Oh, I
We'd
hope not a
covered
permanent
ourselves.
marker.
But
We've been drawn on ourselves. We all went absolutely bonkers.
so when it comes to obviously we have Let It Cry, were there any stories that were really difficult to write? Any stories that kind of sat on your like computer waiting to be written for like years or months on end?
No, with the other books, that's been a case. They literally flew out of me for Scenes of Mild Peril. It's probably the easiest book I've ever
Mhm.
worked on. Admit it, because half it helps. I suffer really badly from writer's block, but I'm really good at being told what to do. So I became quite chubby with a number of small presses. So anytime they would have an anthology on a theme, it's like I can't think of the theme myself. But if your theme is you want something on superheroes, or I can do that. So about half of the stories were written to order for other people's anthologies,
Okay, okay. And
which
I guess that's like the nice thing about having that little blurb at the beginning or end of every story is like it's nice to get that little insight to it as well.
yeah. So yeah, well, no, probably actually about half's probably over the top. It's probably about a third of the stories were written for anthologies. So I had a big spreadsheet of when all the rights would revert to me. It's right, yeah, that can go in the book. That can go in the book.
That's cool. I probably should get a spreadsheet like that as I'm starting to write more things and be featured in things. I'm like, oh, when can I put this out? When can I put this in a collection?
If anything, that's why that probably explains the varied tone of the book, how it goes from horror to comedy to pathos, to because all of the stories were literally going to different places.
I
And
think
there was a lot of, on you go, Ryan, sorry.
no, 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 I was gonna tangent. You're fine.
There was a lot
Total
of humor
whiplash.
in it as well. Yeah, there was a lot of, I wouldn't call it, because like with short stories, you cleanse the palette between them.
Yeah.
But it was cool that I didn't always know whether it was going to be, oh, well, it usually is clear from the tone pretty quickly. But there was a lot of stories in here that were almost like one page punchlines,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In fact,
like
literally,
thrice through.
the one about the imprisoned comedian literally ends at a punchline.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I
and a
think
basement cellar comedian weeps or something. Yeah, I remember that one well.
see, a lot of them had that kind of heavy hitting moment. Like I think of, oh gosh, what was it? Like Room. I've got the book here. I'm going through trying to remember.
83, maybe?
Yeah, it was Room. It was just called 83. There was Perspective. There
Yeah.
was the comedian.
Hmm.
Um, Let It Cry. Like they all had a moment where like the story ends and you go, "Oh, I need to process that for a second. I need to let that one ruminate." Which I think personally, I think that's the tell of a really, really well-written short story because
thank you.
the fact that in whether it be one page, 10 pages, 20 pages, you can get a reader to feel a certain way. Isn't like you can get a reader to feel more in those 15 pages than you could in a novel. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
that punchiness that's really it's really key and all that. Do you, and I know you said this all kind of came naturally and quickly for this. Was the punchiness in and of itself an easier element or like a tougher element? How do you go about that? And like, is that kind of the beginning or the end of the story for you?
It's kind of the beginning and the end. To be fair, I did aim to. I did set myself a page limit for a word limit. Sorry, for each of the stories. Now I didn't want any of them to be over a certain length.
Mhm.
Whereas I didn't do that in the following book. So the following book has two novella length stories, and then the rest of it is just a lot of short ones again. It's
Mhm.
interesting you say about perspective, though. That's the that is probably the most divisive story I've
Really?
ever written. Yeah, people either love the ending or absolutely hate it. The Amazon reviews have got a lot of people where they're actually blown away by it, and then other people saying, "I love the story up until the ending, and then I hated it."
I remember reading because it's one of the stories that stood out to me the most. I really like.
Yeah, it was a favorite of mine.
I remember reading it and going, "Is that lice?" Because and this is bad, but it had me thinking of like when you describe the lice and the statue, I immediately thought of an episode of South Park where they all got lice, and I was like, oh no, is this what this is? And they've all shrunk down, and the lice is huge, and we've all heard the things about like the reason why you can't swat flies is because flies see things a lot slower than everything
Yeah,
else.
perception of time. Yeah,
Yeah, so it was really, really cool there. And then when you had the bit at the end, I was like, oh, damn. Like,
but I have had hate thrown at me from that story. It's quite interesting. I love that reaction though.
So whether it resonated badly or positively, it did resonate. That's the main
Yeah,
yeah,
thing.
100%
resonating is the
resonated.
important thing. Yeah, no such thing as bad
Mission
press.
accomplished. Yeah.
I mean, there's that, and forgive me, I forget the name of it, but there's the one story where like they do like this hyperloop jump, and it ends with all of them like pretty much dead on arrival. I forget the name of the story. Spoilers. Um,
Oh, is it the Valiant one? The one that's kind of
He
my
who
Dan Dare
valiant would be.
spoof. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, that was good as well.
an out and out Dan
I
Dare
think
spoof. That one.
Yes,
I think
yes,
that one
yes.
had my second favorite ship name in recent memory, with the prize of that going to the Hypnagogia from Wixon's Day. That
Yeah.
was Phil
Oh,
Williams.
that's cool.
But Anesthetic is a great ship name. And every time I read something, I'm like, God, I should just start looking up medical textbooks for my sci-fi things, you know?
That's because Dan Dare's ship was the Anastasia. You see, that's where it comes
Ah,
from.
yeah, of course, right, yeah. So there was things like
I'm
that,
not
and
that clever.
yeah. It was things like that that made me. So I think I pride myself on having a bit of a sixth sense for this, right? Are you a bit of a Terry Pratchett fan?
Very much so. And Douglas Adams.
Right, right. I knew
Yeah,
it. I knew it.
yeah.
Because there was a couple of things that I read and I went, this man likes Terry Pratchett. I can feel it. I can tell. Because I can
Yeah,
recognize one or two things.
I grew up on Douglas Adams, then moved to Ray Bradbury, and then Terry Pratchett.
Yeah,
Okay.
and especially in the with the story with the footnotes. I
Oh,
think it was Epicenter,
yeah, yeah.
and that felt like found footage, and that was one of those things that I've had in my mind to try. And I'd read a book by, oh, I can't remember his name. It's a Steve though, called The Erstwhile Tyler Kyle, which is like a YouTube star horror,
Right.
like an influencer horror, and that was found footage. And I remember reading it and going like, God, I've always wanted to try and write like a found footage short story or something. And I read yours, and I was like, oh, there he goes. But that was a good one. Was there anything that you didn't get to try that you really wanted, like experimental things that you think might
Uh,
just be a bit too far?
I'll tell you what. This is going for a blast in the past. I used to be involved with an American small press. I'm not going to say the name because they gave me a disastrous book launch and we severed all links. But they were doing an erotic horror
Yep.
anthology. So I had my first ever go at erotic horror, basically, and that was finished in time for this book as well. But it's like it will not fit. 83 was a push putting that in. I thought that's
Yeah.
that's quite a strong piece for it. But I thought no, sexy horror will definitely not fit into it. So that went to the next book in the end.
Oh, nice,
Where it
nice. It
suited a
got
bit
it
more.
got in there.
Yeah, because the anthology was never published. So
Oh, that's a shame.
and weirdly enough, it's weird to find an avenue when you've got a sexy horror on your slush pile.
It's one that I've not tried, not officially.
I
Nothing
had
that's ever
that was interesting research. I'm telling you.
been.
When you write, so sorry for jumping in here. When you write a short story that you, because obviously you've written quite a few throughout multiple anthologies now. When you write one that you find like you really fall in love with the characters in the story, have you ever taken it further and turned it from a short story into a novella or into something more? Or do you have plans to?
I have not. I have repeated characters though. I've enjoyed characters so much that I've written for them again.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
Sovereign's Last Hurrah from that book, the one about the old the superheroes in the nursing home.
That
I
was
like
Yeah.
the character. I like the character of Sovereign so much that I've returned to him twice more in other short stories. So back in his heyday in World War II and stuff like that. So
Oh, neat.
I have revisited characters and themes,
Is there?
and after you,
On you go, man. Sorry.
and there is, and I like to, and there's kind of a shared universe thing going on as well. Every book mentions Borwell's pork scratchings in some way.
I was that's exactly what I was going to ask. Is there like a David Cortiverse, like
There is,
where
yes,
there's like a bit of overlap between these
there
things?
is.
Because there's thematic similarities certainly, and some elements that come back up, like you mentioned.
The name Albarossa features a lot, either as character names or as
Mhm.
elements,
Mm.
and Borwell's pork scratchings appear in about 8 of my short stories.
Is there a story behind the pork scratchings?
Probably the most detailed one is the digit that was death and the pork scratchings factory.
Oh yeah,
That was the origin of it. So that
yeah.
Oh, it's just I think that's the thing is that with a book like this, I always just end up reading them one after the other, and because they're so gripping, I end up just tearing through a story like this in two, three sittings. But I don't know if that's how short story. I guess there is no true like one way to read something, but there's something to be said about the order in which the stories are placed, about just the wide variety that's in there, and all the little. Because like I think you open with what's it? You open with like I'm gonna say like a 60 word short story, like
oh well, yeah, the one obsession. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, and then it goes into
There was a Twitter
tag.
story, right?
pardon.
It was
Oh
a
yeah,
Twitter story, right?
yeah, written for a
Yeah,
Twitter competition. Yeah, and that got adapted to
that's
comics as
brilliant.
well. So that's in as a comic called The Theory, and that was adapted into a 6-page comic strip, which ended up looking
Nice.
quite
Pretty
nice.
cool.
That's
Dang.
cool, man.
Huh.
So there was a question that I had, right, because this kept coming up in my notes, and I wanted to ask this before we get into the kind of finale of the interview, where I do want to try and go through every story in like a brief soundbite, if you're up for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Uh, and it was to ask you about how much weight you put on the last line of your stories, because I consistently made the note, God damn, that last line really just drives the nail straight in, delivers the twist of the knife or whatever. But tell me about your relationship with the last lines of stories.
They're often the line I write first.
Okay.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I often start. I often start at the end. In fact, but most of my stories, I'll have the ending devised, and then I try and engineer a way to get to that ending. So yeah, it's
Work
absolutely all about
backwards.
the ending. Yeah,
Dang. Well, I think that's what makes it hard hitting. That's it's cool to see the process behind it.
and then I just and I most of them are pantsing as well. There's very little plotting actually goes into it. I just write down what beats I know I have to establish between the start and the end, and then just pretty much just go for it.
Dang. Huh.
And then I wanted to ask as well, from one writer to another, how big is the file of random little ideas that you obviously keep?
I think I'm up to about my 9th notepad now. It's
Yeah.
like Bob Monkhouse's joke book where I've got like a little paper file of here are space stories, here are animal stories. Yeah,
Oh, that's
it's big, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of them never get finished. For every 2 stories I finish, one remains
Yeah.
abandoned halfway. Some
cool.
abandoned that haven't been revisited in 10 years. Some eventually,
Mhm.
some I'll think of a way around it. I've written myself into a corner a lot of times. To be fair,
I was gonna
that's
say
the
two and
problem with not
one.
plotting it.
Like
Yeah.
every 2 out of 3 stories turning into something like an actual story is, I think that's a really good ratio. I think that's
It's
really
not a bad hit. It's not a bad hit rate, really, is it? I
uh,
guess.
that's incredible. Especially you got 9 notebooks, which we'll get into that in a sec. But yeah, Steve, you want to do your speed run here?
Okay, if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
So, uh, so obviously we start with obsession. We've already covered that. That was a Twitter story for a competition. Uh, Tag. I'm just going to say like brief word association of what I thought of it. You can tell me what you think. Tag made me feel like I had sleep paralysis.
That it came from it. It came from an instant sleep
Yeah.
paralysis I had. Yeah. That's where it came from.
I don't know.
That and a combination of a really bad, really horrible nightmare I had.
I
Yeah.
I don't know why I associated it with Pac-Man.
A little bit of that as well, yeah. Thrice Slain made me laugh because I've literally done that to someone in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
As have I.
Yeah. I think we're very much cut from the same cloth,
Yeah.
David.
This
VIP.
was I've got
Also,
to say about that same scenario as well. It wasn't D&D, I think it was RuneQuest, and in the same
oh yeah.
scenario, one of the characters found a magical item. They were questing for a magical item that could let them hear the thoughts of animals. But it had
Mm-hmm.
a but there was a side effect which no one knew about, which is it would just make every animal in the vicinity furious at the wielder. So all they'd hear is angry thoughts, and they got attacked by the animals.
God, RuneQuest going back a bit. I've never played RuneQuest. Let's see, VIP. So we've all been to the Blue Lagoon. Dangerous Yellow, we've covered comedian crying in a basement.
Yeah.
Perspective, the most controversial one. He Who Would Valiant Be had my favorite ship name.
Yeah.
Some Peace and Quiet I'd like to touch on briefly because I also just recently was featured in my first ever poetry anthology. I've never written poetry in my life, but someone that I'd been talking to on Twitter offered me the chance. How much experience did you have with poetry, and how do you feel about poetry having to rhyme?
None, none whatsoever. Before they literally just fun experiments in the first couple of books.
Yeah.
But a couple of readers liked them, so I kind of stuck with it. If writer's block hits, grab the rhyming dictionary. It's a good way to do it. I I've got more involved in poetry over the past couple of years. There's an open mic night here, and I attend that quite frequently.
Nice.
In fact, my next book is a collection of poetry, just a small little chapbook. So the poems that are in all the books so far, and loads of new ones as well. So it was quite interesting. I never wrote poetry to be read out loud, but I am fond of a rhyme. But now I'm performing them. I'm becoming more and more aware of how it sounds rather than how it reads effectively. So
Yeah,
my
I
style
think
of poetry has changed now to be more performative. As the fact that
Interesting.
that's really cool as well.
so yes, that's where
And
that
then,
and interestingly enough, some Peace and Quiet is being drawn as a comic strip now for
oh,
Zarja's
that's cool.
Volume 3 coming out
That's
next
really
month. So
cool.
yeah.
Nice.
In fact, Thrice
That's pretty
Slain
cool.
was 2 issues back, so that stuff is slowly getting adapted for comics now.
I was going to say you're gradually building up like
I
a
was gonna say.
graphic novel worth of comic strips or something from your work. That's pretty cool.
I was saying to Ryan last time, Jack of all trades, master of none, mate.
So let me see what was next. In Vino Veritas, I wanted to give you a little shout out for ending it with the Scottish toast slancher.
Again, Irish wife, so that's where that comes from. That was written for an anthology called Weird Ales, which was a
Oh,
horror book all
Oh,
about
nice,
beers
yeah,
and wines.
that's cool.
yeah.
It's cool to
That's
see all like the very, very unique little genres. And I love like the blending of genres. That's really cool.
And I like reading. I like the research into being a sommelier for that. So about always hold a wine glass by the stem and never the bottle and stuff like that.
it seems, and I think this is something I get as well. I'm always surprised how much creativity is unlocked in me whenever I start enforcing weird rules or restrictions on myself. It's like
Yeah,
you're saying with here's the theme, go and write it, or it has to rhyme, or it has to be about ales and stuff like that. Is that something you found as well? Yeah.
very much so. I'm a programmer for a living, so I think that's where that comes from.
Mhm.
Just give me instructions, I'm good. Leave me with a blank page and just think of something from scratch, and I'll get there in the end, but I'll struggle.
So 83, we've covered 83 was great. That was one of my favorites as well. The Last Hurrah, also brilliant, but we've covered that.
Yeah.
Safety Record was another favorite of mine for the ending.
Yeah,
Whereas it, with the it's,
that was definitely an ending. That was definitely an ending first. Yeah, that's a proper punch. I'm really pleased with the punchline in that one. Again, a few people don't get it, and I thought I couldn't really spell it out any more than I had. But yeah, some people that's the one that gets a couple of blank reactions. They don't understand it.
That's fair.
that's the problem with respecting your reader's intelligence. Sometimes
Yeah,
you run the risk, especially with a joke. I thought that was perfect. There was I'll not ramble on a story because we'll be running out of time if we
Yeah,
do.
we got about 6 minutes, just heads up.
Okay, Savior Machine. About 3, 4 lines into it, I said out loud to my wife, "I think that's David Bowie." Was that written after his death?
yeah, it was. It was again written for
Yeah,
an anthology all about David Bowie stories called
that was it. Yeah.
4716. So, yeah, all about all the stories it had to be based around Bowie. But I thought I'd bung Lemmy in there as well.
Oh, also, we skipped it. I was just gonna say we skipped it, but a comedian walks into a bar. I really like that one.
Oh yeah,
Really like that one. That was the one that ended up with the guy like becoming the marionette, basically becoming the
Yeah,
puppet. It was fantastic.
thank
and
you.
the
Yeah,
ventriloquist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
yes, I'm fond of. Always leave them wanting more. Yeah.
With the David Bowie story with Savior Machine, I also wanted to ask what music would be playing when you die.
When I die, probably it'll probably be Carter USM at this rate. I think they're my most listened to bands. So. Or Divine Comedy, possibly.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's good choices. Keyhole was another favorite of mine. I love weird alternate universe things. It reminded me a little. It gave me a little bit of a kind of like SCP story vibe, a little bit
Yeah.
Twilight Zoney.
I can see that. But I was only aware of creepypasta and SCP stuff after that. But yeah, very very
Yeah,
much so.
yeah,
That was one of the
yeah.
things that kind of popped up in my head throughout the anthology was SCP, which made me want to get caught up on them because I'm very far behind.
Anomalous. Ryan, you can maybe weigh on this one. Anomalous reminded me of my books, which is why I loved it. I was like, oh, this is the kind of thing I'd
I
write.
need to, I need
I
to
love
go
my sci-fi and my horror,
I need
but
to
I
go
really
through
love
it real quick.
weird horror.
I'm a little forgetful. Wait, was this the one where like there was the like the interdimensional thing that popped up
No, this
in
is
the
the one in
room?
like a
Yeah,
dystopian future society with a female prisoner.
yeah, with the eye things with their eyes out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the
Oh, I'm blanking on.
Old Haunts made me laugh out loud. Old Haunts was really good.
Again, it's just a setup for a joke, isn't it?
Oh, I was
Yeah,
thinking
it's
of Key.
the
Sorry,
yeah
go.
the stories
I,
where
I,
it's
I,
the
I
setup and
like the fact that
punchline.
ghosts being held to this plane of reality. Their reasons for wanting to hang around aren't always that noble. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Secret Origins. Was it just me, or was that one that was more meant to be read out loud? It almost felt like a limerick to me.
Yeah.
No, none of them. They were all written to be read. Those ones. This is way before I ever thought I'd end up on stage reading any of these things out.
Well, it also led me to that. Now that I know that your wife's Irish, have you tried limericks yet?
I struggle. I struggle with limericks.
Oh, really?
Really, and haiku as well. That they elude me. Maybe if I'm forced to write for a limerick compilation or haiku compilation, then I'll
Yeah, that's what
I'll,
you
I'll
need.
Cool.
have
I
to
was gonna
get
say,
good
well,
at it.
we'll send you an email.
I wait for you your paper quest haiku book. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was surprised there wasn't a haiku in there. Usually, that's the first stop when an author starts experimenting. Uh, How I learned to stop worrying and love Dagon. The minute I see Dagon in
Yeah.
anything, I'm going to read it. I'm a fan. I'm a huge Lovecraft fan. I'm
I like
guessing
the
you're also a huge Lovecraft fan.
Yeah, but I like the more frivolous side of it. I love the idea of a miskatonic librarian. To be fair, and the dangers involved in their job.
And then I really liked what's it called Epicenter and how it had that interview style. But then it was
Found
also there was
footage.
the one right before it. Shoot, what was it called? Was it Augmented? Um,
Augmental.
Augmental. Yeah, yeah. The one
Oh,
where the one that had like even the footnotes. So it was really cool to see all the
yeah.
different kind of varieties of short stories outside of genres, but like you had poetry, you had interview style, like when it comes to formatting, you had like kind of a documentary, nonfiction style as well, which I think was really cool. I hate to be that guy though. We have about a minute and 40 seconds left. And I want to say, for people who read Scenes of Mild Peril, you have a bunch of short story collections. What's the best way they can get a hold of you, and what would you suggest they read next?
Best way of getting hold of me is probably through my website,
Mm.
www.davidjcourt.co.uk. All of my contact details are in the book as well, if anyone wants to drop me a line, unless they hated it, in which case just stay quiet. Uh,
We,
and
we
then
we highly recommend doing a one-star review without any comments.
and the next thing, which is probably best to read, is Contents May Unsettle, which is my follow-up to Scenes of Mild Peril, which is probably the work of mine I'm most pleased with. If you want some stuff that's a little bit longer, than that, there are fewer stories than there are in Scenes of Mild Peril, but they will tend to be longer. So I think there's only about 15 stories in Contents.
Funnily enough,
It's got a lovely
Contents May
distinctive blue
Unsettle.
cover.
There is. Contents May Unsettle was one of the first books I ever put on the TBR.
Mhm.
And then I found that you had other stuff as well. And I went, well, that one will probably, because I think Contents May Unsettle was a bit too long for us to put in a
Yeah,
box.
yeah, it would. Yeah, I didn't submit that for that reason. Yeah, you said very nice comments about entanglement on Twitter. I remember.
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you like
That's the
the one
first one,
about
right?
the
Yeah, I
World
remember
War
that.
One, the World War One soldiers in the trenches, wasn't
Yeah.
it? National
On
trenches.
on that note, I hate to interrupt y'all. We've got about 8 seconds left. So,
Ah,
David, thank you so much for joining us. The book was
And
Scenes of Mild Peril.
and thank you for inviting me along.
Take
It's
care,
been an
guys.
a
absolute pleasure.
pleasure.